Hello, welcome to the latest in the series of podcasts from Neurodiversity in Business. My name's Dan Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Neurodiversity in Business. I'm really delighted to welcome someone who's very well respected in this area, Lara, who is a D&I culture expert, and she'll introduce herself in a second. But why I was really keen to get Lara involved in this is because I've received a lot of feedback from within the ND community around how important diagnosis is to validating someone's experience and understanding of themselves. So I'm going to ask Lara to tell us a little bit about the journey she's been through. But before we get into that, Lara, welcome. Thank you for your time today. I'm really pleased to see you. I've been following you for a little while on LinkedIn, and obviously we know each other from the ND community. But tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're working, what you're doing at the moment.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be part of this great effort. So basically, my background is in consulting, but as you know, over the past couple of years, I have taken a shift in my career to focus specifically on inclusion-related consulting. And in doing that, disability inclusion was a big part of my focus, but in principle, neurodiversity came up in the conversation a lot. And I was obviously part of, setting up awareness groups and making sure that, different parts of the neurodiverse conditions are very well known to people in terms of symptoms and how they manifest themselves, especially in the business world. As part of my focus was to educate colleagues around how do we make teams more inclusive, how do we make projects more inclusive, and so forth. And initially, a lot of the ADHD symptoms I could identify with, but it never really occurred to me that I also need to get a diagnosis. So a bit about my background. I am Lebanese, and I have grown up in Lebanon. And I have grown up somewhere where you don't talk about this. Like you get diagnosis if you really have a severe condition that makes you borderline dysfunctional. Otherwise, there isn't any sort of awareness around this. And then I've gone through a career in consulting where I was just being a consultant. So I thought a lot of the things that I was facing in the workplace were related to the job itself rather than to how I approach the job.
And so just for clarity then, so you're saying that you've gone through your adult life without a diagnosis, and it's only been recently then you're now diagnosed, are you?
Absolutely. So I have another role as a board member on a study with an amazing doctor, Dr. Nancy Doyle.
Hero of mine.
Yeah, she's amazing. But basically, it's with the University of Birkbeck. And I sit on the board of that. And one of the latest studies they shared for us to review was specifically around ADHD in adult and in relationships and so forth. And when I read that paper, I felt the immediate need to get my diagnosis because I felt 99% of what was there in that paper. I'm like, oh my God, this is someone describing my life.
Like a light bulb moment.
Absolutely. Okay. And so I got my diagnosis around 7-8 months ago that I am on the ADHD spectrum. Okay. And yeah, the only thing that really changed in my life is I understand better now, my energy levels and how my brain works. And, especially now with COVID and with the shift to working from home, being on back-to-back Zoom calls, how my brain works in that sense. Now everything makes more sense to me.
Got it. Well, look, I don't mean to pry too much into your personal life, but just if you're happy to tell me, so what was that diagnosis route like? So you've got this exposure within the ND community. You had a light bulb moment, or probably a series of them. And then how do you get a diagnosis then? Did you go through the NHS or did you have to go independently?
So basically, I know that the NHS does offer that, but I already have a therapist, a psychologist that I work with. And so for me, it was really easy to just bring it up in one of the sessions and ask for her support there. And she has taken me through the process, and she basically got me diagnosed.
Okay, great. And so the diagnosis result, does that come within a session? Does it come as a report afterwards? Obviously, everyone's different, but how did it manifest for you?
Well, we spoke about it in the session, and she basically gave her opinion immediately, and then we ran through a questionnaire together as well. She did offer the report after that, because obviously, different people, even if you're ADHD, we can be both people can be ADHD, but they can, have different needs. Their brain can work a bit differently, have different energy levels, and so detail of that goes in the report. But for
Right.
me, it was really interesting to discuss this with a professional, because I could then relate better as to how does this affect my personality, how does this affect my relationships, and so forth. So it kind of brought it to life in a way where a professional made sense of it with me, rather than for me to read it and make sense of it on my own.
Got it. Got it. And what was the first thing in your head then when she said? Was it? It wasn't a surprise, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, it wasn't. But then the first thing that came to my head is all of the feedback that I've gotten in my professional life around you need to slow down, you move too quickly, you're moving at 100 miles per hour, we can't catch up with you, you put pressure on your managers and so forth. It made sense then that, okay, that's just part of how my brain works. It's not me deliberately doing that.
God, you could be talking about me there, but if I talk about you for a second, I also view that as an incredible positive, in terms of the fact that you're quick to market, you're responsive, you're always action orientated. So I guess that kind of just highlights the interesting element of this, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I feel like there is, in the corporate world, unfortunately, there is still, a mold of what success looks like. And whilst now diversity and inclusion is a very big topic, I really think it will take some time for companies, for cultures to really grasp how do we allow people to bring their best self to work, and how can this be viewed as a positive rather than you are not aligned with the norm. You are a bit faster or a bit slower or a bit, I don't know, too disruptive. Like it's still there's still this is what success looks like, and then you are a bit deviating from how that image should manifest itself. And I feel like I do view it as a positive as well. But there's another element of this. I think this is now linked to high levels of burnout. And I think both individuals and companies will need to do something about managing that. Because if you're in a high paced environment and you are, on the ADHD spectrum, then you being in, full capacity most of the time, your brain runs really fast, you're fast to act. There's almost this expectation that you create as an employee that this is okay, this is how I work, and this is how I can handle things. But also, on the long run, this burns you out. So, unless you really understand when you dip, how you should respect the fact that your brain now needs a break rather than push yourself a bit harder, I think it really helps with the well being in general. So, I'm still in that phase where I'm trying to understand better the effect of this on my well being and on my career and on my professional life altogether.
Got it. Got it. Well, look, thank you for being so brave. I think why I'm really keen to do these very personal and intimate podcasts is because, a young ADHD lady or guy kind of starting their career sees you been successful in a big four corporate environment and actually says, well, look, I can associate with this and I shouldn't be excluded from the workplace, shouldn't be excluded from particular types of jobs. So what's your messaging then for the next generation of people watching here?
Well, I would tell them that as much as companies will need to do some sort of adjustments to support people to bring their best self to work, I think there's also a responsibility on individuals themselves to really one, understand better what they need, how they like to work, and get to know themselves better, rather than feel the need to hide that aspect of themselves so they show up in a way that is expected. I think it's an equal, you need the space to be yourself, but you also need to bring yourself, and you need to feel this is okay. um I definitely would, encourage people to look at what does that mean from, my well-being perspective, because I'm a big well-being advocate, and I really think that um, if people with ADHD intend to go to the corporate world, I really think there is a huge need for at least them to own the part of the responsibility around managing their well-being. And companies obviously need to be addressing that as well for neurodiverse individuals in general.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And let me go back in your career then. So just let's make this tangible then. So what are a couple of examples of maybe this insight that you have now around your neurodivergence that perhaps looking back you can say, okay, that's a good example. So you said earlier, feedback you've received in your career, and we've all received feedback, right? That's part of our growth and our learning and development. So what jumps out to you? Are there any interesting examples?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I started my career in tax consulting, funny enough,
Wow.
and then I shifted to human capital consulting. But the first, few months, I was doing tax returns for US expats, and that required, me to sit and focus on one thing for like 2, 3 hours. And especially during the tax season, it's you getting through as many tax returns during the day as possible. And I used to, like, I remember I used to get off my desk like 10, 15, 20 times. And I used to like drink a lot of water just to have just to have the excuse to go to the loo a bit more often than I should. Because my brain could just not cope with me focusing for a long time. Um, and I mean, in the end, again, as you said, the ADHD part of me, where I can finish things in a small period of time and be more efficient, that made up for the breaks the regular breaks that I used to take. Um, but as a junior consultant, everything that I was told in terms of feedback, I used to internalize
Mm.
rather than really sense check with myself. Is this a fair point of feedback? And why do I do this? Like, I did not have the awareness, and I was young. I was, early 20s. I did not really understand who I am. Um, so there were parts of the feedback that really like got to me. They really made me cry, and they really made me feel like I am not good enough. Um, Especially with, some attention to detail around, I don't know, like doing a deck for the full day, and then by the end of the day I definitely miss some details, or I'm not so much sharp anymore. And those kind of feedback really got to me, like, oh my god, I'm not a good enough consultant. But then all I needed to do was just to work around how my brain works, and when I needed a break, just take a break, do regular meditations if needed, and so forth. So looking back at my career, I would say there were so many things that I took personally and I took on board, and I was forcing myself to change. But I did not really need to change. I just needed to understand myself better. Unfortunately, there wasn't that sort of awareness, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Um, but now it is there, and now I think it's going to be an equal effort from individuals, but also from companies, to make sense of this and support people based on their own needs.
Yeah, and look, that's a really pertinent point, isn't it? That actually, what businesses need to understand is that neurodivergence is out there in the population, 15 to 20%. It's a massive number, and you kept coming back to that phrase, and I think I will steal it from you. But it's about bringing your best self to work, isn't it? And I think I've used the wording around bringing your authentic self. And as we know in the consulting space, the diversity of thought that you get from different people and different points of view in a team, that just delivers better client outcomes, doesn't it? Because you're not all thinking on the same way, you're not all thinking about the problem from the same direction. And in a positive sense, Lara, I'd be interested in your views. It feels like we are maturing as a
Yeah.
society now. Like, for example, yourself, I don't think we saw many people like yourself who would go out there and post on LinkedIn about the diagnosis a few years ago. And now it feels like we're talking about that. So that must give you a lot of kind of encouragement and energy.
Absolutely. And I feel like, the power of storytelling and the power of just being open and honest, sometimes is underestimated. There's this phrase around, when you speak about yours, when you give yourself the freedom to speak openly, you also liberate others and you give them the freedom to do the same. And I feel like each and every one of us who goes through an experience that could be valuable to anyone out there, there's so much power in just sharing that and opening the conversation. Again, I mean, to your point, this is absolutely part of the reason why I feel comfortable now just, going to my employer and talking about this and saying these are my needs and this is how my brain works, and I cannot do back-to-back Zooms, or if I do that then you don't get the best of me. And it just makes you feel like there isn't any part of you that you need to be ashamed of or you need to hide, and you can just talk about it openly and express your needs. And to your point about the diversity of thought in the team, I think this is a very important point. I mean, whether you're a consultant or wherever you work, I think every single individual works in a company or somewhere that serves a certain market, serves a certain number of people, and you need representation there. And in this whole, diversity and inclusion conversation nowadays, the intersectionality is another really interesting element that is coming to the table. Like the fact that I am, an Arab woman living in the UK, I'm an ethnic minority, and I am on the ADHD spectrum. That makes it really interesting because a lot of the feedback, again, that I got about me being very direct or very fast or any of that, that was attributed to my ethnicity and where I grew up and my culture. It was never attributed to, oh, maybe there's something about you, from a neurodiversity perspective that you need to check. And so I feel like this is where the conversation gets really interesting. And this is about, again, about bringing your authentic self and bringing your best self and being able to talk about all the different angles to who you are, that make you who you are, basically. So yeah, I mean, it's a very important point, and I cannot stress enough how much businesses will really need to create a safe space for employees to talk about it, but also, do their part to ensure that as much as possible, it's going to be a journey, but as much as possible, there's that culture of true inclusion, and there is that conscious effort to ensure that we have different representations from different diversity groups in every team.
Yeah, no, I think you've expressed the kind of mission and aims of neurodiversity in business very well there, because what we've seen is a massive uptick in organisations who want to do the right thing, still struggling to do it because it's one of the trickier elements of diversity and inclusion to get right. But as we see, you get this right for the neurodivergent employees and you get this right for the whole organisation. And hopefully the corporate world is developing that thought process, and we see it, don't we? Across the big professional services firms, but also across big tech companies, manufacturers have just joined NiB, global retailers, etc. So there is a great coalition around this. So we're quite excited. Yes.
Dan, I want to ask you. So I've worked with you for a number of years now, and I have, realized a few things about your ways of working. Just curious as to whether this conversation has created any sort of awareness for you personally, and whether you are considering to get yourself diagnosed at all.
Gosh, Lara, you're good with the direct questions. So no, look, I'm relaxed, and actually you give me more energy to talk about this topic. I think that people like you who are being brave and putting themselves out there, like you said, it's those values of conversations. And you're not the first person to mention this to me in private. So look, working in neurodiversity in business, as you know, we're just exclusively volunteers, pretty much exclusively neurodivergent. So there's so much dynamics around that going on at the moment that people in my team are mentioning it to me on a weekly basis. So I don't know, Lara, thank you for raising it in such a public forum, and I'll come back to you.
Perfect. I look forward to that then.
Great. And just to conclude then, so look, what my takeaways are from this are that One, it's just an incredibly important topic to get right. I think that the value to businesses is there by getting it right, because we get the best out of high performing people like yourself. And then also, I think on an emotional level, I would like to see the younger generation look at you, a role model, an example of success, and actually be more accepting of self-disclosure and talking about this in the corporate environment. I don't want to represent your views. You give me a summary of how you think this has gone.
Yeah, I think you really summarized it well, Dan. Yeah, I think, I mean, what you're doing is great in this space, just bringing businesses around the table. Because one thing you mentioned today is it's really hard to get this right. Because, I mean, if you think about it, neurodiversity is one extra layer that cuts across all the diversity groups. So you could be an ethnic minority and you're diverse. You could have whatever sexual orientation and be on the neurodiversity spectrum. Like, this really cuts across so many other different, and whilst companies have been coming at inclusion from a diversity angle rather than from a true intersectional angle, you know, they started with women, and then, you know, ethnic minorities, black, you know, like LGBTQ plus, and so forth. And so where does neurodiversity sit, and at what point will it come that it's the right time for it to be embedded? And then again, it heavily relies on people feeling comfortable to disclose. So getting this right is really, really hard. And I think the best that we can do to support businesses in this is to open the conversation, really, and have this safe space where businesses share what they're doing, share the efforts, share the learnings, and rather than be in competition of this, we need to really stand hand in hand, and we all collectively need to get this right, you know, for ourselves and for our children and for a fairer society. So I think this is my biggest wish, is if we really talk about this authentically, say, you know, this is our intention, but this is what we're doing, this is what's happening with us on the ground, who's going through this as well, how can we support each other, can we trial things together? And companies who are doing well on this front, maybe if they can share the learnings and share their journey with other businesses. And then from a personal view as well, I think, again, the more we personally can share our personal journeys and our struggles on a daily basis and how we are navigating that, and what this means for us professionally, I think we can be, you know, role models for other juniors that are now coming in the workplace, or people who have concerns, or people who have been in the workplace but don't really know what to do about this and how to open the conversation. So yeah, I feel like, you know, the biggest takeaway is, let's just talk, let's keep talking.
Great. Well, look, I'm glad that I shut up, because you expressed it far more eloquently than I would have done. Again, Lara, really enjoyed talking to you. I've definitely learned a few things, and I'd encourage others who are viewing this to follow Lara's role model behaviours, follow her on LinkedIn, and, you know, see how the story develops. So thank you for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Dan.